YouTube link.
All right. Welcome to the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. We have an amazing guest today. I want to give a huge shout out to Lizard Jesus. Really excited for this guest. Really excited to bridge kind of the differences and the ideas between free market anarchy and also Ancom and egoism. We're going to talk about a lot of amazing things. Also, if you enjoy this podcast, please check out the Mad Liberty on Discord. Check out the lpmisescaucus.com if you want to keep the ideals of Murray Rothbard alive. Also, I have my friend here, Jeremiah Harding from the Agorist Nexus. He's posting a lot of interesting articles and stuff. He's not actually that scary, but he makes some interesting faces as well. So, Lizard, I'm super excited that you joined me. I'm super excited we connected. I know I made initially a comment talking about Antifa, and you explained more to that regard. Then you were talking to me about Ancom and egoism. I'm not super familiar with Max Steiner, but thanks to Jeremy saying I'm the whole bottom strip, I did look into Bakunin and things like that. I'd like to learn more, though, about anarcho-egoism and Ancom stuff, and how do you actually see that bridging with free market anarchy in a decentralized society?
Well, I guess I need to start out by explaining what egoism is. It's kind of going throughout life and picking apart like what humanity has created as social norms. What Max Stirner called spooks. Basically, they're fixed ideas that drive people's actions or overall like motives throughout life. And an egoist would kind of strive to reject those things and pick out which spooks fulfills his own purpose and like ego, and like what makes him happy overall. It's a very self-fulfilling philosophy. So instead of like viewing Ancom as like the one true way for like people, I see it more as like something that fulfills my ego and something that I would like to participate in as an individual. Um, you know, so I guess that's really the only difference between like a regular Ancom and an egoist Ancom.
Yeah, well, there's different variations. Like, I see some anarcho-capitalists or free market. I'm going to start actually using the word free market anarchist. I think that's a better description to kind of bridge the idea. Some free market anarchists are more oriented towards like spirituality. Some are more into technology. Some are in between. Like Jeremiah, talks a lot about agorism, and there's different forms of agorism that can take hold as well. So I think that's an interesting combination also of like Max Steiner's philosophy, which I believe that's where that comes from, and also different types of Ancom things.
Definitely.
From an Ancom like perspective and taking a look at that, I'm really interested to learn more about that, anarcho-communism and syndicalism in turn. How do you see, if you were able to like set up an Ancom society somewhere, what might it look like? How big would it be, and how would it maybe cooperate with a free market or an agorist society?
Well, the thing about I guess humans in general is that we're going to end up trading eventually, even if it's amongst ourselves in the community, and even if that community is self-producing, and that in itself is a market. And I think that people kind of misinterpret what a market is in that aspect. Um, and a free market, well, a free market in my mind looks like a decentralized currency, right? And value is subjective to the individual. So, like, say, I don't know, I made this example on Facebook the other day. It was a picture of like a mattress and like this being sold in a market, and this homeless dude sleeping outside. And I said, in a free market society, the homeless dude would be able to like figure out what was valuable to the mattress owner and be able to go out into the world and find that and like trade that for the mattress or whatever. And that could be literally anything. It's not restricted to a single thing. Could be like veggies out of the garden. Could be like buckets of ice cream. Whatever. Um, but and I guess I just I see that kind of happening all over the place. It's not really restricted to like an Ancap society or whatever.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, because you can
I
break
guess
free.
how a free market would. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, because you can break free from labels. Like, when I was talking with Jeremiah about this, like how would mutualism work? And that's an interesting idea. Is it's not necessarily going to be like, okay, here's where Ancom stand starts and Ancap stand, ends. It would just be like, hey, I need mutually beneficial goods for this resource. Do you have this? Okay, I have this. And then you can either trade through mutually beneficial barter, or, in my opinion, some kind of currency that everybody agrees upon, or most people in that jurisdiction agree
Yeah.
upon.
Yeah, exactly. I think that currency should be a very decentralized and fluid thing. And I think that, it should follow the fact that value is subjective to the individual. I think that the fact that we're forced under a centralized currency is a product of like, a tyrannous market, crony capitalism, and, just evil shit.
Yeah.
And to me, I would
The
just say that
capitalism that we live
capitalism,
under is fascism.
because to me, capitalism has been the system forever, and anarcho-capitalism came along like a long time after the establishment of what was like called capitalism, first derogatorily by the left, and then later on there was an anarchist version built. But even Rothbard, who like coined the term anarcho-capitalism and wrote the founding documents, he was all about saying that, yeah, state capitalism sucks asshole, so we should get rid of it and do better this time.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of early Rothbard. Late Rothbard gets a little weird.
A little weird. Huh. That's much
he
gentler
kinda
than I would
turns
put it.
into
I would say,
Satan.
fuck that piece of fascist shit. Like, I wrote this entire
Yeah,
article
well,
saying that that the Unleash the Cops, he was being completely genuine. He that wasn't a metaphor. That was just him going full fash because homeless people bad, but like refusing to acknowledge that the state capitalism he opposed was literally the reason a lot of those people were homeless. So maybe he's a heartless piece of shit.
yeah. Honestly, I haven't really read into much. I've developed a lot of my own personal worldviews out of like talking to people and what they personally believe in and their perspective and stuff. I've kind of arrived to where I am just by purely rejecting like groups and like just kind of following my own path. So
Hey, same here.
Yeah. That's why I a lot of this thought, because sometimes it doesn't have to necessarily be like, oh, I picked up Malatesta and then I figured it out, or I picked up Rothbard or Triple H or Hans Hermann Hoppe. Sometimes you can derive it just from mutually beneficial conversation like we're doing now to figure out how it works, which is actually kind of like my question to you guys.
Well, picking up Malatesta, though, that's more like that burning cop car the other day. That was lit.
That was lit.
Get some propaganda as a deed in this motherfucker.
I mean, look, if you execute somebody on camera, it's going to happen. And that's what this was, clearly. This is just an organization with a monopoly on security and monopoly on the area, and people who don't have any conscience, any moral compass, and they execute somebody in cold blood. And this isn't the first time it's happened. People need to start realizing that state policing doesn't work. Not only doesn't it work, but that it's not even security, that the Supreme Court even said, we don't care about your property or your life or anything. They're there to enforce laws. Well, I didn't make the laws, and I don't really care who is necessarily behind it. But if you're going to enforce something, it has to be, to me at least, community consensus. You can't just be like, well, here's the laws I made that I'm going to put on you.
Well, clearly the response should be to vote harder.
I'm not necessarily against local elections, like
Man,
I
I hope
said.
you're being sarcastic.
Me?
I mean,
Sarcastic?
no, well, I have this ongoing discussion with agorists that I say some voting at a local and a state level, if you can make some change in coalition with people, is okay. I don't think it's really going to work at a federal level. But
Mm.
in terms of coalitioning, which is kind of what I want to bring up the main discussion here, how do you guys see building effectively more and more, getting more discussions like this between people who have different types of ideas between decentralization and expanding the scope in general for just people with different, I guess, schools of anarchy to get together? Because that's one.
LJ over here can go first.
Well, I think that honestly it starts with education first. There's a lot of semantics and miscommunication. Like certain terms out there will get you shut down immediately, not listened to in certain groups. Like for example, if you walk into leftist spaces and go, "I'm an Ancap and I think all these things," they're just immediately going to shut you down, and like you're not going to get across to anybody. Um, and unfortunately, what we have to do to get around that is we have to redefine ourselves. I was talking to Krim about this the other day, and relabeling yourself as a free market anarchist will, I have found, gets you a little bit further because it gets people curious, and it brings you know more people to the table. As a byproduct of that, you're able to talk to people about the technicalities of your beliefs and stuff. And the same thing when, as a leftist walking to ANCAP spaces, I like to say decentralized communities as opposed to Ancom.
Yeah,
Um,
I love what you're saying right here, because funny enough, when I went exactly into Ancom spaces on Discord, other than the one I was in yesterday, and I said, I'm on Ancap, I'd like to make friends with you. I believe in anarchy too. Immediately I get like neo feudalist, you're not an anarchist, which I know I'm an anarchist, so that's not something that necessarily bugs me per se. But the thing that I didn't like is I'm saying, hey, we both want decentralized societies we can work together. But I think the term is what they're stuck on. They're stuck on the semantic formulation of how that term represents a real world, either action or set of actions or a community, and not so much that, hey, I just believe in free markets, like complete free market association and voluntary interaction of all functions. All industrial functions should replace political functions, um, as Perdome basically put it. So with that being said, I think that's extremely valuable insight. If we just change the terms to, hey, I'm a free market anarchist, and hey, I want to live in a decentralized community with syndicalism or direct democracy or horizontal, if you guys believe that works, then I think that would open up the thing. I think agorist is a perfectly fine term, and mutualist is still a good term. Um, and primitivist, I think, is fine. But what's up?
Whereas me, I just say I'm anarchist, and if they don't like it, fuck them. Because ultimately, I think that all these side labels ultimately end up like sort of distracting from the point. I think that like ultimately, like, if you want to say like after I'm anarchist, if you want to elaborate on your type of anarchy that you like personally uh, prefer, practice, etc., then great, fine. But if people aren't even willing to get past anarchism, past anarchy, then it's because they want to control and manipulate your message. And to me, what people should do is they should boldly say what they are and then defend their position with everything they have. Like, personally, I don't like the whole like sort of watering down and washing away kind of deal that a lot of people do, or the sort of ideological siloing that happens. And part of coalitionism is like the thing that I've been writing a book on for a long time now, because I'm really trying to fine tune what's in there. The primary thing is realizing that yes, things are going to be difficult to build. but the things that are based on that difficulty and still survive are what's going to have the resiliency to continue on and actually have some sort of like meaningful impact. Like additionally, there's the fact that like they're going to break down. You know, for instance, I've been kicked out of so many groups for opposing pedophiles within their ranks, you know. And I'm not going to say which ones they are, but what I will say is that like if your group can't even agree that a pedophile is bad news for your movement, then you're not going to succeed with the masses no matter what you call yourself. You're not going to succeed with your movement if you won't oppose those people. So that's just like part of it. Like you need to have some standards, you need to have some accountability, and you need to be able to, you know, either excise bad elements or educate them toward being good elements. And you need to be willing to stand up for these principles to begin with, or you're not going to have a resilient movement. You know, if you're not willing to be bold and, you know, stand up for what your like personal beliefs are, then nobody's gonna nobody actually serious is going to take you actually seriously about like your desire or your realistic ability to smash the state.
Well, it comes down to this. It comes down to understanding that social cooperation, unless you're on a desert island, is necessary for society and civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something everybody, even statists, would agree on, that yes, we need to socially cooperate. Where the divergence happens is they say, oh, we need a monopoly on force. Now, they don't say specifically that, but there are people now with what's happened recently with cops. I guarantee you, you look out, I saw it on some conservative people that, you know, oh, well, you know, they did a bad thing, but we need this. We need not. We don't like what happened. We don't like the
reformism.
war. We don't like the war in Ukraine. We don't like this. We don't like, you know, all these things. But we still need the Pentagon. We still need a centralized thing. And I'm saying no. Actually, what's better for social cooperation is to sit down like what we're doing here and actually figure out how we can solve the hardest, you know, case thing, which is to find a society that can not only create social welfare that's better than the state, but can do it on a sustainable and a long level. Like not just to say, hey, I'm going to have an anarchist society for a few years. And how can you actually put these ideas into practice and create a synergistic effect that not only is long lasting, but almost eliminates a lot of these nationalist and globalist structures where people are just able to say, hey, I don't need an organized monopoly on defense, security, ecom, or, you know, anything else. I can work through that. So that's my thoughts on that as well.
In my opinion, I think that starts with individual and communal change. And with that, like, I would say that self-production is high up on the priority list. If you're able to self-produce with like a 3D printer and like your own energy production, like solar panels and, you know, mini wind generators on an individual level, of course. And, you know, just things like that, you're able to like grow your own food and things like that. It means that you're able to stop feeding into the status quo markets like the grocery store. Generally, you have to go to a corporation, or, you know, you're buying corporations inside your local market to get products.
Or just going to the local.
The market's so fucking controlled that, like, you know, you can hop off of it, and eventually you can rely on mutual aid with your community, trading with your neighbors and stuff. And through that, you can start denying the state. You know, you can, I guess, disregard the state and like kind of say no to it, but still consider its existence or not and whatnot. But completely denying it comes at a different level, and it takes actual practice and action.
Parallel, counter, and anti-economy.
Yeah, and I'm learning a little bit of that through, like, because I was asking questions about like Konkin's work. Because funny enough, what did Rothbard say at the end? Like, maybe Konkin's right. So I'm like, okay, maybe he is right. What did he actually say? And I was looking at how these different economies, like red, black, gray, all that stuff. Hello, Earth Nerd Anarchist. We also have Earth Nerd watching. She's a green anarchist as well. which I'm interested in that movement as
Hello.
well. Along with that, along with also primitivist ideas. Funny enough, all my friends have been talking, and I made the joke to Chat GPT all day, and now I literally like so frustrated with it, because what's funny is all these people like, I love Elon Musk, he's a savior. Did you hear what he said about AI? If you're going to take everything, I'm like, no. I'm like, oh, he said it's like summoning a demon. And basically I start posting Teddy K things under all this Chat GPT thing, like, hello Chat GPT, tell me what to think, tell me what to do. I'm like, I feel this is like controlled by some, backdoor status thing. But I like what you're saying, Lizard, about actually just completely denying the state, because if we can effectively do that through community action and through, in my opinion, online action, like I'm really, really excited to be part of the group now that I'm in, and be part of the Mad Liberty, because now we can come up with different ideas, not only to deny the state, but we can actually come through, different channels on the internet to say, hey, we can actually cooperate. Here's a real synergistic organization that's working, that we can accept all each other's ideas. Not only that, but we can gear our movements towards actually defeating the state, rather than arguing amongst each other. Because I think there's way, way, way too much infighting. I think,
it'd be great if there wasn't that. If there was a group that
I
there
agree.
wasn't that.
But I mean, infighting exists in every group.
Well,
Go ahead. Sorry, I tend to go on too much, but infighting.
oh, it's
will
okay.
exist.
I was just gonna detail how our community works. We believe in what's called frith, and it's getting to know each other on a personal level in good faith, basically. So like we disregard personal attacks, and we don't calling out untrue things and just toxic behavior. We avoid fallacies in our conversations. And we also we try to just respect each other in general. We run our community on a loose form of consensus. So if somebody begins to get uncomfortable with people, then we hold a meeting about that, essentially, and determine whether or not people are comfortable with that individual.
Yeah. Well, what I liked is you actually took time and you asked me a bunch of questions. I asked you a bunch of questions, like you were asking about religious people and people's preferences. And I was, interested to learn about that. And then I was also interested to learn about some different ideas you guys have. You showed me solar punks, which I didn't know what a solar punk was. And I actually do like the term. It is pretty cool. And then, you definitely asked me about frith, which I believe is comes from Norse mythology. And you did ask me about youth liberation, which I am actually, my understanding is it's saying that, hey, if I'm qualified to do something within the constraints of my age, it shouldn't just be regulated to someone who's older, which is the best way I can explain. I'm not an expert on that. But what I think the way you did it is pretty good, where you have community and you bring people in and you ask different questions and they are able to ask different questions and everybody gets along.
Yeah. So the youth liberation stuff, it's weird because our society kind of treats children like objects. They don't have any rights. They're denied all the rights that adults have. And so I'm not really directly involved with it. You might ask one of our members. You can contact me about that, but they have a lot of information on it.
Frith is an interesting
I'm kind of new to that as well.
Go ahead. Sorry. There's a little delay.
I was just going to say I'm pretty new to solar punk as well. So as far as I know, it strives to kind of bridge the gap between technology and nature and find technology that works with nature rather than kind of feeding off of it,
Yeah. Well, what I think's cool about that is
that's as far.
I think there's a lot of, I mean, I haven't met anyone yet that says I'm an anarcho-transhumanist, but if someone said, hey, I still want to use technology, and primitivists came along and said, hey, we want technology that doesn't disturb the environment. Now, I think more green anarchy could get along with this. I don't know if anarcho-primitivists or John Zerzan would necessarily use this, but that's fine. If there's decentralized communities, there can be decentralized tribes. But if somebody wants to utilize technology in harmony with nature, which is probably someone like myself, like how can I use technology and how can I also make an environment that is not harmful, that I'm not like destroying the air or the water or anything like that, like a lot of these statist things do, then solar punk, I think, is a very interesting paradigm to take a look at. And I'm not necessarily like someone who says there has to be like an absolute on technology and everything like that, or an absolute on nature. But I see the psychopaths in charge using AI for very, very bad usage. So that's why I'm definitely cautioning people to say, hey, let's take a look at this.
I'm kind of curious as to like what your fears are about AI and stuff. You seem to kind of have an overall negative perspective on it.
Well, funny enough, because I still work in the computer science field, and I see how AI works. Now, the problem I have is not so much that AI is good or bad. It's a set of algorithms that you teach, like chat GPTs just fed a bunch of information. The problem is the people behind most of the AI development, I'd say like 99.9% of it, have, in my view, very totalitarian and a very statist mindset that this is how we want to engineer humanity. And
like everyone here know what active fence is?
Yeah.
And there's people like Dr.
I'm unfamiliar.
Okay, active fence is where they're feeding a self-teaching AI sort of information about like not only the things to block, but how to block them. So that they can be blocked before they're even posted. It's basically automatic, like preemptive censorship. And it's like fundamentally evil, which obviously means that the WEF has been writing puff pieces about it. So.
Huh. That's interesting.
So that's
I don't know. I think that there's a lot of potential with AI. But I think with as much potential and positivity that can come from it, there's negativity as well. And it does definitely kind of depend on who holds like the technology. So
yeah, correct. And it's not to say like someone say like, are you against like guns or Abrams or anything like that? Like if I started to see Abrams at like a flea market and I'm like, oh, okay, how much for this? They're like 20 grand. I'm like, where can I put it? They're like, here's some land. Then I'd be like, yeah, it's cool. But the reason I'm not like a fan of like all this war technology or not to say like, oh, all weapons are bad or like people can't own high powered guns, because definitely in an anarchist society, I don't think that would be a problem, either left or right. I think the problem is I'm looking at how the state is using all this technology and I'm like, this is only going to go south. So that's why it's not so much the technology in and of itself. You could use technology for amazing things, but they're using it, in my opinion, to enslave, destroy, and control people. And that's why I started to get a negative view on it.
Yeah, it's, technology, cultural elements, whatever. It needs to be used and generated for the right purpose. The means have to be justified, or the ends will not be good. The ends never justify the means. So, it's sort of like, for instance, if I wanted to run a community based on frit, without having some sort of grit or some sort of like respect for outsiders as well, who might be coming into the fold, that would be a bad thing, if they used frith as a way to, sort of harass other people that might want to join. And block out outsiders in general, that would be a pretty bad thing. If it's the same thing with AI, like we've got to have the right intentions for the building and use of the technology, or it's just going to turn into totalitarianism in the end. and cultish in groups, maybe.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
it's not only going to turn into totalitarianism, they're going to use AI to manipulate everything
For
you
sure.
do, to harvest all your data and to know everything. Like, the problem is with AI.
And just being real, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just got to say the real scary thing for me is I read The Running Man, and it makes me homicidally ragey to think about the movie, so I'm not going to get into that. But what I will say is that the Running Man book is great. The Running Man book is fucking awesome because part of it is this dystopian notion of they get to just fake whatever they want to. They get to make you look like that you did whatever they want to make it look like you did. So like that's what this AI is really turning into. They can provide realistic sound of anyone saying anything. They can provide realistic deep fakes of anyone saying anything, and all they really need is low latency to even make it look like you're doing that live. Low latency and sufficiently complex computing. So it's fucking terrifying. They are going to frame the world and make anyone they don't like into treasonous terrorists ad hoc whenever they want to. We're descending into madness territory.
Well, I think we can. I think by the coalitions we're creating here, honestly, we can stop it or at least slow it down. And one thing I was talking about yesterday, and I thought was interesting, was I was talking in like our group meeting about like Bitcoin and seeing like, okay, well, they have all the transactions from here and there. If you had a human saying, okay, where's this wallet address? I got to track it down, this and that. You couldn't hire enough people to do that. But once you introduce AI, they're like, oh yeah, go ahead and use Bitcoin. Then they can track, oh well, Bitcoin's coming from here, 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 and here. So that's kind of my issue. Is I know that the state will use
Bitcoin has samurai and wasabi, just to be clear.
Fair enough. We're talking about like Bitcoin versus the prospect of Monero in terms of how the privacy could be used in utility. And there were some interesting actually claims made.
Or pirate chain with ZK snarks built in by default.
I'm not familiar with that. I can't say.
Okay. ZK snarks is zero knowledge, and it's basically like it's encryption with the complexity level that neither computer knows how it worked to begin with. So like it's a very complicated algorithm of encryption basically, and Pirate Chain has that built in by default. It's sort of an extra layer of security, but like it's not completely necessary. XMR is fine, and usually a coin join or a cash shuffle is also fine if you wanted to use Bitcoin or BCH. You know, like there's options. You got options. Okay. But like ZK Snarks makes it like much more private by default. So if you want that, Pirate Chain is it. But like part of the problem with Pirate Chain is they released too much of that like right off. So basically they ended up with like really low mining rewards like baked in like at some point. So the viability of the network might come into question, but we'll see. We'll see how that runs. I don't know. Fuck it. It's like fine. Everything's going to die anyway. The heat death is coming.
No, we'll be okay. We'll make it through this. I have a lot. I am not black pilled, just to let the audience know. I have a much more positive outlook on humanity, coalitioning, and stuff. And I do believe, well, I argue with Jeremiah about Somalia. But anyway, Lizard, question. You said you read some Rothbard. You actually, liked early Rothbard, which I like earlier Rothbard a lot more. If some people who are free market anarchists or agorists or individual anarchists or even mutualists wanted to learn more about anarcho-communism other than just basic stuff that they could read on the internet or YouTube videos, what might be some stuff, some resources, some people you recommend? Hey, check out this guy for anarchism or egoism.
Well, I definitely would not start at Max Stirner for egoism. Don't do that. That can actually like really hurt people. I've seen it black pill people to the point of like being suicidal and shit. So be careful with that. But as far as Ancom stuff goes, I would start with Kropotkin, just because he's like kind of the person who founded like he didn't found the philosophy, but he was the first to write it down. And I would start with the Conquest of Bread, because you kind of get to know like who he is as a person in that book and where he's coming from. And then there's what is it? I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like Fields Industry or it has to do with like organizing, like the actual like foundation of anarcho-communism. He talks about a decentralized model, um, built upon like individual respect within the community.
Oh, do you mean
And
fields, factories, and workshops?
yes,
Okay.
that one.
Okay.
Fields,
Yeah.
factories,
And
workshops.
by the way, to me, I don't know. For me, for my personal like stake in this, I would say like Bakunin over Kropotkin because he wasn't a politician. So
I
I
think
don't
that
really know enough about Bakunin to comment on that.
well, if
I
you
like
want to read something very fun, where he dunks on fucking Karl Marx, read Bakunin's Anarchy and Statism. I forget if it's Anarchy and Statism or Statism and Anarchy, and it's just absolute barrage of shit because he was right there in the First Workers International, and he was all about saying, yeah, you know what? You're not handling this well, and your dictatorship of the proletariat is just going to create a new class structure, and it's going to fuck us all over because you're not fucking do that. And then he got kicked out for being a spy because Marx is a piece of shit. So yeah, like you learn about all of that. You learn about like why anarcho-communism is the only real communism in terms of like actually helping the workers, like why state communism will always result in state capitalism, basically. So Bakunin's really good. Also Malatesta, because propaganda of the deed. I'm not going to say more than that because it's going to get censored on YouTube, but you can look into that if you want. Handing people bouquets of flowers is the way I put it now.
Okay, yeah, you always use that phrase. I will also add to that. Emma Goldman is very. I do like what she says when she said there's no communism in Russia. I'm like, what the heck she talk? She doesn't know what she's talking about. That Russia was. I'm like, oh, I get what she means. This is a variant of state capitalism because the bourgeoisie, as he termed it, just basically said, hey, the proletariat took over where the bourgeoisie happened. And she made a very good point there. I'll say this. I like Kropotkin's ideas a lot. I do like one thing I want to point out with Bakunin that no one points out that me and Daniel point out is this. Everybody loves Solzhenitsyn. With good reason, he brought out some horrors of what the state capitalist society, or if you want to call it authoritarian communist society, Marxist society, brought out. What's interesting is he said it's easy to say it was bad after the fact. Hindsight's 2020. I can say like drinking, vodka and putting a sports car in high gear is a bad idea. But the interesting thing is Bakunin, before anything, said, "Hey, if you let the people who had the revolution take over for the people you revolted against, it'll just end in another bloodbath." And to me, that's almost. It's not necessarily a simple observation. It's a very complex observation, put simply. And honestly, it's funny to me, Marx either couldn't see that or didn't care. So Bakunin's good in that respect. And when it comes to syndicalism, I do really love Kropotkin from what I've read. I haven't read a lot. And Rudolf Rocker, I think, is good. Emma Goldman and definitely Malatesta. Is there anybody I'm forgetting in the Ancom sort of framework or syndicalist framework? Should people look at Noam Chomsky too, or no?
Early Chomsky, yeah, he's sort of now. I don't know, like the early Chomsky, where he was talking about manufactured consent, is great. His documentary was also like it was okay. It's very self-promotional, but I am exactly the opposite person to complain about that. So like all of that is there, but like also to me like if you want sort of a look at all of this, you can look into like C4SS coverage of some of it, and you can also sort of my firm recommendation is to start with that book, right? My firm recommendation is to start with Bakunin's book because you'll find out a lot of sort of the inside baseball, especially since newer editions of the book have like just like a rundown of sort of the events that led up to that, because people during the time would have known what was going on, but like people in in like the modern era sort of need that explained to them. So modern versions have like an introduction, which explains all the events that led up to that. You know, and I sort of sympathize with Bakunin in a lot of ways because I have been often removed from groups for various things, because I stood up on my beliefs and didn't shut up. So, like, Bakunin has a significant amount of good things to say on this subject, and to me, I would say that should be the starting point.
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes from Bakunin is the quote where he says, "People are not much happier if they're being beaten by a stick if it is called the people's stick." That's
Yep.
one of his greatest quotes that summarizes communism and the downfalls of communism, which he called it. He was one of the first guys to ever critique communism, and like you pointed out, I think I heard Jeremy that he was kicked out by Karl Marx, I believe. And
he criticized state communism. He said that it wasn't really communism at all.
Exactly.
It's not. It's not a decentralized community, which is the interesting thing. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to say what Lizard really brought was some great insight that when he said, like, instead of saying Ancom, we say decentralized communities. It's not a decentralized community if you have a ruler and someone who's micromanaging every single or almost every single economic transaction. And I think that's something great to take away. Also, I do want to introduce my co-host, Daniel Betro, Lizard Jesus. This is my co-host, Daniel. He's also part of Mises, and we are talking about, and I'm really, really passionate about coalitions with anarchist groups. And I'm definitely going to invite you to this. It's a great community Lizard got me into because he asked, was I interested in coalitioning? And I said, absolutely. It's the Mad Liberty Project. So that's an awesome thing right here. One thing I was going to ask now, the Ancom side, what are some things that you think Ancoms could read or look at from the free market perspective that would also give them insight? You know, any thinkers like Hans Hermann Hoppe. I know early Rothbard is one Ancoms have looked into, which is cool. I think Mises is helpful, even though he's not an anarchist as well. I think he has good insight. Is there any thinkers particularly we could recommend to the other side, or not so much the other side, but the other school of thought?
Honestly, I don't really know a lot of Ancaps beyond early Rothbard to be able to recommend anything past that.
Are we talking Ancoms or Ancaps?
I'm talking Ancoms and Ancaps. Basically, what happened, I'll just give you the real quick of the situation, Daniel, here. I'll come back. Lizard, sorry. There was my friend Keith Knight, if you've seen Keith Knight's podcast,
I'm friends with him.
Made a post about Antifa. I said something incorrect. And then Lizard corrected me, and I said, you know what, let me say hello and be cordial because most people want to fight on Facebook. I'm like, I'm not going to fight on Facebook. I'm going to ask him questions. He showed me an awesome, amazing group. I felt right at home with it yesterday about anarcho-coalitioning. And I said, I want to talk to someone who believes in something different than I do, but also has the same vision of coalitioning that I do, and bring him on the podcast. And before you came on, I asked, what are some Ancom writers that Ancaps can take a look at? Because I'm going to post this in Mises and other places. And then I also asked what, on the other side, if somebody's more in a decentralized community mindset, what are some free market thinkers they could look at? So,
the two I think of immediately are Emma Goldman, obviously, Ayn Rand, and there was another earlier person who he was very vital and important in the sort of rise of anarchism in America and the purge of anarchism by the United States government in the early 20th century, where they had laws banning anyone who identified as an anarchist from coming from another country to America. If you identified as an anarchist, you were banned from coming to the United States. They mass arrested anarchists who were protesting, and yes, there was some violence. Obviously, there was a lot of bombings that were going on back then with the the beginning invention of TNT and dynamite and stuff like that. But A lot of good, peaceful people who might have had maybe dissenting opinions were arrested and imprisoned and killed by the state. It's like the lost history of anarchism in America, and you don't really learn much about it. I mean, you learn about communism and stuff like that, but there was a difference between the communist and the anarcho-communist at that time, and there was great variability. But some people try to lump them all, conservatives, I'll say mainly, try and lump them all together in the same damn category and just call them all communist, and as though they're all equal in value and actions. But I don't think that's true.
Here in Arkansas, which is the state I'm from, there's actually a relic of that. It's actually illegal here to be an anarchist. It's what they call a flagging law. So if you're doing something else illegal and they find that you're an anarchist by thought, then they stamp that on with your charge. It's like an extra charge or whatever. But yeah, they lumped that in with the Red Scare when that was going around, which is fucked up because the Red Army fucking fucked over Nestor Machino and basically killed the entire fucking Black Army.
Yeah, it's insane. I guess I have a question in the comments as well. I'm looking through the comments now. Hello, Minty. Hello, Earth Nerd. Hello, Eddie Brock. Someone asked if Bakunin had any prejudices towards people of a Semitic background. But that's coming from anti-anarchists. I haven't heard that, by the way.
So Bakunin basically hated a lot of people, and he would write very critically of various groups, like in a very frank way. But I don't think he specifically had any like overriding hatred of Jews. To me, I don't see any real strong evidence that he was any more acerbic toward them than anybody else. I've been accused of being anti-Semitic because I'm willing to call out things like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Bilderberg Group, AIPAC. There's a lot of people who will just throw that out there because they would rather not have a conversation with you. So many people have just shut me out of conversations. So I'll go with who won't do that, and I think that's a much healthier way to be.
Well, the issue is this: like if someone's doing a conversation, just attacking someone, I understand. Like, okay, I'm not just going to blatantly attack someone, but if we're having civil disagreements, which I think is this, I think between anarchists we should say, hey, we have a shared principle based on liberty. And based on that shared principle, we can move forward with that, even if we have specific disagreements. Robert Murphy actually makes a good point. A lot of people say, like, oh my God, in Ancap society, you'd have private security firms attacking each other. Well, we don't have that now. Like, there's people with very strong disagreements about, like you guys were asking me about religion, about abortion, about things, but we're not all hiring, like, oh, well, I'm going to hire my private security or whatever it is. I'm going to hire this. Attack someone. If we can.
Oh damn, man! I fucked up then.
Well, I mean, you're good at that, but I mean, you attack the best economists in existence, and
yeah. Peter Leeson. No, you know who's got better economic sense? Sonic the Hedgehog. He can manage his entire thing without any of that.
But Sonic the Hedgehog didn't come up with the HCQ, the hardest case question, and he also didn't.
Ending question acronyms in Q never goes well for people.
Okay, but well,
if you want to talk anti-Semitism, there's some Q questions you probably shouldn't be.
I'm not a fan of Q. I'm not a fan of Trump. Actually, and here's also the other thing. One thing I don't actually agree with. I mean, and I'm maybe the minority in Mises even, but here's one thing I found that going to, and Jeremiah actually opened me up to this. Going to our, if you want to call them authoritarian counterparts, like if you want to call it authoritarian, or going to like Pinochet or something like that, or authoritarian or fascism, is a terrible idea to me at any goal. So to me, it's ridiculous that people still, try and support Trump or try and support Biden in any way that call themselves anarchists. I don't even, when anarcho-capitalists say, oh, well, I just vote him out of desperation, I'm like, I honestly get like you're not a real anarchist. You're trying so hard to justify him, or when people try and justify Putin, people try and justify Bolsonaro. People
They
even
hate
try,
the left or the right more than the state.
and people try and justify Meloni. I think that's her name in Italy.
Yeah.
I actually agree. Jeremy could have said it better. You like the left or the right more than the state. You're like, oh, well, capitalism or this. I like my status better than their status. I just want to play the anarchy. And I'm telling them, you're playing a game. You're not an actual anarchist. If you're going to be
voting is fucking the voting is mob rule first off, and like with how many fucking anarchists they've been jailing and like killing just by living,
which has been going on for a near
disregarded
century.
state. Like it's fucking ridiculous to call yourself an anarchist and still vote. Like you're literally participating in mob rule of the minorities.
So let me ask you a question, Lizard. So you're essentially an agorist, right? Would you consider yourself that, or?
I hold some agorist views. Yeah.
So you've completely lost all faith in the political system as a mechanism for change in our society?
Yes.
So what do you think the alternative then is? Like, let's just take your hypothesis as being true, as being factually accurate. I'm sure Jeremy will probably agree with you 100%. Let's just say it's true, hypothetically. What is then the mechanism to create change in society if voting is no longer a viable option?
Well, I would say that people who are directly involved with one another, like your neighbors and whatnot, should be able to come together and organize amongst themselves and decide what they want to do as a community and how they want to organize. Whether that be consensual opt-in democracy that doesn't impose itself on outside communities, or consensus, which is what I would prefer, where everybody kind of sits down and talks to each other. And, if somebody is uncomfortable with something, then we might add a certain element in to make them comfortable or agreeable to the situation, Consensus is kind of a long and grueling process, but it's worth it because everybody gets listened to, and everybody is heard and nobody is uncomfortable moving forward.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I agree with you on that. All that.
And like just two other things, because like the thing we recently had conversations with some people on the Agorist Nexus podcast, and the like 2 episodes were about a husband and his wife. They were like 2 separate episodes because one of them had to watch the kid while the other was on. And basically what we went over was their homestead, like what their general practices were and shit like that, how they got their families involved, the fact that, they separated their kids from the system as much as possible. And then like one of the key points, I think, is that they had enough product from their own garden that they could not only trade for stuff that they didn't grow so that they could have a more bountiful like harvest, but they also had enough that they could just give it away to those who needed it. And this is just from like their garden that they personally have. So if people are willing to work for themselves, are willing to work the land and use the earth as, nature was sort of like built to do, they'll be a lot better off, especially in a communal setting with people who mutually respect each other and don't treat each other like shit or like, outsiders. If there's like a sense of frith and grith enough that everybody can sort of like subsume into these circles without the concern of bad actors or negativity or any sort of thing like that, then that would be great. That would be hugely beneficial. And also if they were willing to like do this enough that they built their own parallel economy, whether that parallel economy be based on a more communist or market-oriented thing. And that's the reason I sort of like, I just say it's capitalism, and because anarcho-capitalism is the new form. If people are going to say Ancap, fine, but you got to say the whole thing there. If you just say capitalism, you're talking about what's already existed. It's always funny to me when people are like, you know, oh, everything that's happened is like good. Has been the result of capitalism. And then if something goes bad, well, that's crony capitalism or that's socialism, and that's completely untrue. It's been capitalism the whole time.
Don't you
and
think?
and Rothbard agreed with that too.
Anarcho-capitalism is the highest form of anarchism. Like, I think
no.
if you were to take
what? No, I don't think.
What's the highest form of
of
anarchism?
It's not a matter of highest form. It's a matter of being the whole.
Well, because there's
it's
different degrees.
It's a matter of being the whole bottom fucking strip.
Such a thing as the highest form
Here's what
anarchism. I really don't believe in that. I believe that people just have preferences and that's it.
Correct. Here's what I'll say. I will say this. Not that capitalism or anarcho-capitalism is the highest form of anarchism. I'll say anarcho-capitalism is the only form of capitalism. And how can I do that? Well, if you type in capitalism in Google, this is literally the cabal's own thing, and an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. So how I actually met Daniel and why we got along is I said, there's so many libertarians that are saying Twitter is a private company or this is a private company. And I say, this isn't controlled by a private company. The state's involved. So when Klaus Schwab says stakeholder capitalism, when people say the CCP has CCP style capitalism, to me, it's not really capitalism.
It's capitalism. And Rothbard would disagree with you.
Well, I disagree with Rothbard. I'm not 100%.
He's right, though.
So, Jeremy, what you're saying is there's a big difference between capitalism as it has been and the type of ideas that you and Lizard are talking about. Like, there's a differentiation between those.
For real, things. Yeah, that's why there's a whole group of anarchists who are much smarter than whoever wrote that definition for Google. Those people wrote a pamphlet called Markets Not Capitalism, full of a bunch of essays defining why you shouldn't call it capitalism if what you advocate is a free market. Rothbard was in that pamphlet. A bunch of noted thinkers were in there, and it was distributed by C4SS, which was like initially a part of the Alliance for the Libertarian Left, which was created by Konkin. So like the actual libertarians who've been supporting anarchy the whole time, instead of saying unleash the cops later on, they've been on board with this the whole time. And also Rothbard early on supported the idea of opposing state capitalism and saying that if we're going to keep the term capitalism at all, we got to shape that shit up. Like ultimately, when you and like, let me read this quote from Rothbard directly, because I think that's going to be beneficial going forward to understand what he said and what he meant. Quote, if we are to keep the term capitalism at all, then we must distinguish between the free market capitalism on the one hand and state capitalism on the other. The two are as different as night and day in their nature and consequences. Free market capitalism is a network of free and voluntary exchanges in which producers work, produce, and exchange their products for the products of others through prices voluntarily arrived at. State capitalism consists of one or more groups making use of the coercive apparatus of the government, the state, to accumulate capital for themselves by expropriating the production of others by force and violence. Throughout history, states have existed as instruments for organized predation and exploitation. It doesn't much matter which group of people happen to gain control of the state at any given time, whether it be Oriental despots, kings, landlords, privileged merchants, army officers, or communist parties. The result is everywhere and always the coercive mulcting of the mass and the mass of the producers. In most centuries, of course, largely the peasantry, by a ruling class of dominant rulers and their hired professional bureaucracy. Generally, the state has its inception in naked banditry and conquest, after which the conquerors settle down amongst the subject population to exact permanent and continuing tribute in the form of taxation and to parcel out the land of the peasants in huge tracts to the conquering warlords, who then proceed to extract rent. A modern paradigm is the Spanish conquest of Latin America, when the military conquest of native Indian peasantry led to the parceling out of Indian lands to the Spanish families and the settling down of the Spaniards in a permanent ruling class over the native peasantry. That's Murray Rothbard. It sounds pretty leftist because he was more based early on. And he was right. He was right. It's been capitalism this whole fucking time. This whole time.
If you
and it doesn't matter that it's private or not, because the goods were initially obtained through the state violence. And so the whole thing has a public aspect to it. By this narrow definition of capitalism, where everything else is not capitalism, nothing is capitalism.
So can I
because
ask
it
you a
was all
question?
procured that way.
Well, I call it
And
corporatism when the state.
It's
Is-
capitalism.
So Jeremy, would it even make sense for us to continue using the term anarcho-capitalism? Is that term essentially meaningless?
You should just say market anarchy, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Because if you're suggesting, and I agree with you in a lot of senses, that a lot of people on the right and maybe even the Libertarian Party make excuses for capitalism and try and make this large differentiation between what is capitalism versus what their version of capitalism is, when in reality, I think there's either anarchism or there's statism, right? I mean, it's very difficult to see.
And there are many forms of statism.
Yes, exactly. And again, I mean, there's tons of variations and variability of what the state looks like. That you can have a state with a large market, a state with a communistic state like Soviet Union. So there's all these different looks.
Soviet Union was state capitalist.
Yes.
Or you could argue as a authoritarian communist.
It depends on what your definition of communism is, right? And that's the problem.
Emma Goldman's definition was really good. She wrote "There's no communism in Russia." She wrote this entire. She said that it was basically a really authoritarian version of state capitalism, where there was a class voucher system and all that sort of thing. That the vouchers replaced the existing capital. That the system replaced the existing capital structure and just made everything worse. That the dictatorship of the proletariat just became a dictatorship, which was exactly what Bakunin said would happen, and that's why they kicked him out for being a spy.
So do you think that Emma Goldman, who again was a person with great integrity and honesty, and
she fled Russia because she lived there.
Yes. And she went to Lenin and she said, "What you're doing is monstrous. What you're doing is not what we talked about. And Lenin was a tyrant." And then Emma obviously went back to America and told the United States government, "This is what's going on in the Soviet Union. You have to understand it's more authoritarian than anyone can even imagine." What do you think? So do you think it's possible to have the conceptions of Emma Goldman, her version of communism that obviously was not what the Soviet Union was doing? Is that possible to sort of implement on a nation state? Like what does communism look like, versus, like you said, what the Russian Soviet Union model?
Authoritarian communism would have no vouchers. Authoritarian communism would have no paper parcel system. Authoritarian communism would have a sort of syndicate of people controlling the means of productions as representatives of the people. And it wouldn't be a matter of getting a piece of paper that said you were entitled to this much X, Y, or Z. It would be a matter of you go there and the guards say, "Fuck off. We own these machines right now, and you can't do anything with them." It would be basically spitting in the face of the workers by not giving them any sort of guarantees and also not giving them access to the means of production. It would be it would honestly be worse than state capitalism. And that's the reason why they don't do it, because state capitalism is a much easier way to sort of muscle the cock down the throat.
Yes, and it almost always devolves into that state capitalism that you talk about. It
starts there and then never leaves. Like Mao Zedong literally said that he was going to implement state capitalism. You can find this on the Marxist archives. Yeah, and there are still some Maoists that don't believe that they're basically dengists in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, they are, but just not to cut it off. But actually, we do have some good questions. I'd actually like to hear Lizard's perspective on this as well. Definitely, because I think that people make a misdirection when they someone actually made a very good point here, and Lizard also brought that to my thing. Sometimes just when people use "own the commies," or they say so-called libertarians, and there's a lot of libertarians who do this. They support right-wing dictators, "Oh, I like Pinochet. Oh, I like this. Oh, I like I haven't heard any libertarians say they like necessary Mussolini, but there probably is some goofball out there that's doing that. And they're saying, I'm doing that. I'm saying, I'm doing that to own the commies or own the pinkos. And for a while, I was like, and then now I'm just like, no, actually, what you're doing is you're just perpetuating state violence. And really, there's a fundamental difference between someone who's, an authoritarian communist, like a Marxist, and someone who actually believes in decentralized communities and syndicalism, and we're talking
And even some Marxists can be reasonable about this subject. Just gonna say that before Lizard answers. Like I've got one of my like most stalwart audience members is an avowed Marxist, and he's all about like everything I say, and he uses Marxism, like Marxist points, to justify that. I keep telling him though that he would be better off if he just switched over to sort of Bakunin's camp and kept the Marxism that he liked. But Lizard, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to address another comment here about
pull it up for you.
How it's hard to have a consensus when there's 4 million people in a city or even 1,000K. The thing about that is that you're not actually going to be able to know that many people on an individual level. The human psyche can only file so many people. I think it's around like 150 people. And also in a giant city, you're not going to be directly involved with people who are like miles away from you, you know? So really, it would break down in some micro communities, like a bunch of micro communities that just kind of live next to each other. If, you know, you can imagine that.
Yeah, no, I can not only imagine that. I think that's the best answer, is that even if you live in a city, like let's say you live in Pittsburgh or something, you're going to live in a suburb of Pittsburgh or downtown or something, you're going to interact with those people. So yes, the population can be 100,000, it can be 1 million, it could be 10 million, but the human scope of interaction, like even if I wanted to be best friends with everybody, which I'm actually kind of, down in my little circles, but even if I want to be best friends, the capacity is not there to know people individually that well. So you'd have to talk to people, get to know them on a pretty personal basis, and there would end up being a lot of
talking to people and not just making assumptions about them. Man, we can't do that.
It's pretty difficult.
Drop it, man. Like, I get it. I also like what he said here. Government should have a darn thing to do with me making money or giving my time or product away if I want to be paid for a product. I keep hearing this term tanky. I don't know what the heck a tanky is.
A tanky is an apologist. Tanky is an apologist for authoritarian, like alleged communist violence. They support Lenin and Mao and shit like that. They're pieces of shit.
Okay, they are. All right. And he did respond. It would have to be broken down into local micro communities, no question. Just saying state control is appreciated by lots of people. So having these agro societies would require separatism. What do you think about that, Lizard?
Well, I actually disagree with that. Like, there's nothing really stopping individuals from going out from their local community and interacting with other communities. I mean, the community might respond in a hostile way depending on how you conduct yourself, and that's kind of dependent on where you go. But, that's what I'd have to say about that.
Also, Eddie Brock is making. He said, "Great stream." So, excellent job. And I'm Lizard. I'm really, really grateful you took the time to do this. I'm also eternally grateful you invited me to that community yesterday, because I'm super excited to be there. We'll get this up on YouTube. I'll put this in my John Zerzan interview, and definitely going to get more and more people to interact and coalition build. I get we have some differences. I get like not everybody sees eye to eye. We're all individuals. But if we can maintain a level of just working together to defeat the state, I think that's what's necessary. Holding the vision, but losing sight, endlessly searching solutions. But sometimes when I'm alone like this, I wonder how much it's just an institution. That is some good poetry or rap right there. I would say it's not an institution, because in the sense
it's what, the anarcho punk guy can't recognize crass lyrics? What?
Hey man, I can play them. What?
Okay,
Crass
right.
is the institution?
No, that's a song by Crass.
It's
Yes or by Will.
Yes or I
Will. Yeah.
Yes or I Will is what made me an anarchist. I read that when I was 12, and I'm like, I didn't even really understand it. I didn't understand what the Falklands was. I didn't understand who Thatcher was. I didn't really understand the deeper meaning of Yes, Sir, I Will. And it's a very hard musical production to listen to. It almost goes on like black metal or noise. But there's if you read the lyrics, I think it's worth it.
Oh, and also if you want another English band sort of like really gets your brain fucked, Killing Joke is excellent. Listen to Killing Joke. Everybody should listen to everything Killing Joke has ever fucking put out. It'll broaden your fucking horizons like a spread asshole. It'll go see your mind.
All right. I don't know what that means.
You don't know what Goatsy is? It might be better if you don't.
All right, I'm talking about an agorist society not being an agorist, intermingling with another society. I'm talking about agorist society.
Well, see, okay, so, Chris, there is no such thing as an agorist society. Agorism is counter-economy. So if you use agorist methods, you're an agorist. But it's not a matter of building an agorist world or an agorist society. It's a matter of...
It's more of like tactics and ways of like denying the state more than anything.
Yeah, like you build the society you want and you get there with agorism. You don't build an agorist society. Like what? That's suddenly the white market? Then agorism ceases to be. It's like, no, agorism is about subversively going against whatever part of an economy wants to control you. It's not about building a society. The society is up to you. It's not that cut and dry, yo. I hope that explains it. And I'm definitely being an ass about it, but I'm also right. So,
okay, yeah. Well, here's what I'll say. I say the two primary staples of agorism is, yes, it's a counter-cultural economy where you're going to use methods outside of the state apparatus. And I've never met an agorist that I know of. Maybe there's one, but I've never met an agorist that says, let's vote. I think me and Daniel have a different perspective on the fact that, well, I can use some local elections and some state elections, hopefully, to change some things. Now, a lot of people are like, just like, Sanity is Free, Jeremiah, Justin Pedini. A lot of people would harshly disagree with me and say,
well, I think fundamentally what it comes down to, Kareem, is that you have to understand with voting that there are a lot of flaws, that the system is to some degree rigged in the favor of not only the elite, because that is a very broad word, but of those who have established a level of power and authority in the system. So you should have low expectations. You shouldn't put all your eggs into one basket, in the sense you vote, that's all you're going to do is vote. And that's the only way you think you're going to change the system. That's the only way you think you're going to come up with viable solutions. If that's your thinking, if you're, pretty much all about voting, all about elections, and maybe that helps to some degree, but you have to diversify your techniques and your strategies to be able to change the system. And just being like, oh, I'm going to vote and that's going to be it. That's just not enough. And I'll come out and say it. It's just not enough. You need to vote with your dollar. You need to vote with your business. You need to get involved in your community. You need to, start gardening, coming up with local solutions and stuff like that. I just think it's not going to hurt to vote. That's all I'm saying. It's not going to hurt you.
Also,
at least do it. And if it doesn't go the way you want, fine. Then But to me, it just seems like something you should do on top of all the other things.
How did that person get to a position where you can vote for them? Money. That person got all those dollars for their campaign, for all this advertising material they used to litter the landscape until, like, they take the signs down and throw them in a landfill or prepare them for the next election. And they take all these signs, they take all these like billion-dollar TV ads, they take like all this advertising revenue for the social media and shit, and they plaster their name and face everywhere so you get to see their greasy ass demonoid complexion everywhere you go. And they do all this while they at the same time manipulate the system using the additional money from dark money campaigns, like Bill Gates throwing so much money at the Biden campaign last year. George Soros and all these institutions funded by the people who eventually make these people win, whether the people want them or not. And all this money could be going to better causes, could be going to a better place, so that these people
get
aren't
it. But
electable
here's
to
the thing.
begin with. And that would make this voting with your dollar thing a whole lot less hypocritical and make a whole lot more sense.
I would say this.
So
I'm
go
not
ahead.
going to cut off anybody, but real quick, the local elections, is not as much. You don't need a huge.
You still need money.
Also, Chris Davis is asking some questions. Like he said, I disagree with that. What's the end game of your agorism? Would agorism end with anarchism and no state system?
Agorism probably wouldn't ever end. You know, even in an anarchist paradigm, allegedly, there's still going to be exploiters and people trying to reinstate the oppression machine. So just fuck with them then. Agorism is a consistent
The thing
lifestyle.
about that is that you can't kill an idea, right? But that goes both ways. And authoritarianism is an idea, so that's going to live on whether people like it or not, as much as anarchist thoughts will.
Yes.
Yep. If you meet an authoritarian in an anarchist society, piss on their lawn.
I mean, why do we have a lawn? Why don't we just have a garden? Because lawns are statist, like you would say.
But hey, but that's how you would know. So just piss on their lawn. If they got a lawn, just...
Oh my
But
God.
no, Jeremy, to go touch on what you said, I agree with you that the vast majority of politicians, especially at a national level, I mean, part of the only reason why there is because of money and because of dark funding sources. I agree with you. But when we look at politicians, even ones that we would disagree with, that we don't favor politically, there are those politicians who get there by single dollar, small donations by their constituents. Not everyone's, funded by big donors. A lot, many are. But there's a lot of politicians who are up and coming who are trying to actively oppose that system of special interest money and donors money and taking money from these various foundations. And I think those people should be supported. The people who are trying to get money from actual working class individuals and not taking money from these big special interest groups, those people are the ones you should vote for, not for the ones who are taking millions and millions and millions of dollars from these various dark money sources.
Which one of those has a plan for the CBDC?
I don't. Well, we'll have to. There's a lot of people out there running, so we'll have to see. We'll have to look and see. But
find
I've heard
the local small dollar person who wins and has a plan for actually concretely opposing the CBDC, because if they can't, then the entire economic system is going to be based on trickling down money from the feds to the local governments, and the local governments are still based on the dollar. So if the dollar switches to the CBDC, any county that's still based on that is going to be fucked out of whatever liberty these people pretend to be able to support.
Yeah.
And it's all going to be downhill anyway.
So
that's the thing. The banks control the economy and society at large to a fuck ton of degree, and if you can't, and if yes they do, and if you can't get them to, yes they do, and if you can't get them to oppose them, if you can't get a plan together cohesively to stop their control of the economy, you're fucked.
So hypothetically, Jeremy, if there was a politician that may not have be perfect, but has a sort of outline, or at the very least a plan to prevent CBDC from being implemented in their county or their state. It depends
on what the plan is.
Would you vote for them? I get it. I get it. I don't want to go into the specifics, but a politician who had came up with a plan to counter CBDC in that circumstance, hypothetically.
If this politician seemed like they had a viable shot, and had a way to keep Spokane off the CBDC, sure, fuck yeah, maybe. But nobody is and nobody does in Spokane is ultimately a hugely statist place anyway. I say I'm an anarchist and I get deer in the headlights in a lot of places. And I'm fine with that, because if you don't like freedom, fuck them.
So would you be the change, be the man with the plan that you want to see in the world? Would you ever run? Because I think you have a lot of actual viable solutions, and to see you run, I don't know. I'm just saying, I think you could make a very good political candidate because you're not very political in the typical sense.
The only real solution here is personal secession. If I wanted to live my own personal morals, I need to walk away and go get a cabin in the woods, which, by the way, that's in the works. I just need enough income. People can feel free to throw stuff at my Patreon if they want.
Yeah, which I help out. I got another good comment from Minty. Off topic, I watched a debate earlier between a self-proclaimed MAGA communist. And a
Yeah.
fascist orthodox.
It's a meme made by Jackson Hinkle and
Oh,
Jimmy
okay.
Dore.
I was gonna say that sounds like Jackson Hinkle.
Yeah. What? That's interesting.
It's a joke.
Yeah, I kind of figured. I was like, what is that?
By the way, anyone who wants to eat what I'm eating protein pancakes. You can eat these and get gains.
Which are they, like a certain brand?
No, they're normal pancake mixed with added eggs
okay.
and also whey protein isolate.
Sweet. The isolate is the cleanest, man.
I got 5 pounds for like $30 recently. I'm stoked.
That's pretty good.
Because that's one of the primary things is that instead of getting other people to do things for you, you've got to get strong and independent on your own. That's the real message of anarchism: is get this way on your own, live your own message, and also while you're doing that, hold yourself and others accountable, and build a community based on that. Because a community based on that is going to be a lot more resilient and oppositional to the state than anything a politician could possibly do, even if they ran. The best way to run is to ask yourself, what would Sonic do? He would just run. He would use his legs to run, not politics.
Don't you think, though, there is a bit of a fear of the consequences of a lot of people just dipping out and leaving society and going to their own cabin in the woods? Like, what if everyone gets a cabin in the woods? You know, there has to be some people who stay in the fray to try and make changes, whether, you know, that's 1% or 2%
Cabin
or something
in the Woods
like that.
was a joke. What I was saying is you need to find your freedom and plant your flag. It's not a matter of begging for it or running away. It's a matter of staying right. That's like, if you don't like it, leave. No, I'm staying right the fuck here. Fuck you.
I got you. I thought you meant it in a different way.
I'm being an asshole.
Okay. So what does this say? MAGA communism was created by Jackson Hinkle, and it's basically just conservatism with communist aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
That's nonsensical, in my opinion.
It's crazy, yeah. Some ideas are, you have to admit, beliefs are odd, as Bill Hicks would say. Anti-statum is the way, ignore their authority. I do agree. And
well, like,
yeah, if you want it. Yeah, if you want a cabin in the woods, go for it, Chris.
But
I'm not stopping you.
I definitely don't think you shouldn't. I definitely don't think you should.
You could always experiment with plumbing while you're there.
What would John Zerzan say about that, Jeremy? Plumbing, we're getting too advanced.
What? You know, but I'm just saying you could experiment with plumbing. There are various things you can do with that.
All right. This is actually, there's a lot of really good comments. There's a lot of really good insights.
Yeah, I tagged everyone in my server, posted it on Facebook and Twitter, so I'm the asshole that's the reason for this. All these people are in my audience.
I mean, that's fun. I'm trying to bridge audiences together because while we might all agree on specific things, I think the Mises audience should take a look at this. I definitely think your audience at Agorist Nexus take a look at this. Mad Liberty, and we can all come up with different ideas. We're not ever going to agree on all things, but I think the beauty of it is we can agree on fundamental principles of decentralization.
Yeah, and you know, if people want me to run for office, we're going to have to show some support before that. So feel free to throw some money at my fucking Patreon and shit. Because right now I'm feeling the broke life.
We got to get you a big donor. Come on. We'll hit up George Soros. We'll get you the Open Societies Foundation.
Hey.
George, no, see, here's the thing. If George offered me money, I would have to turn him down. Because I oppose where he got his.
Where did he get it?
Brothers?
Nope.
Where did he get his money?
George Soros got his money through a bunch of like essentially associations with the wealthy elite. He got it through building foundations and dark money channels and shit like that. And he, you know, I don't associate with that shit any more than I absolutely have to. The closest I get is if you want to support me in a free way, you can share my shit on Facebook. You can share my pictures and my videos and shit. And there's going to be a lot more of those coming up because I get paid by Facebook. They're the first platform to actually pay me like YouTube should have years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny because y'all know I hate Facebook, and I've been a real asshole about Facebook. They've been the platform I've criticized the absolute most. I have 2 big articles on it.
YouTube is for me because they banned my account, which, you know, the process of banning is like strike, strike, strike. and they've given me 3 strikes on this account. Thank God. Well, I got 2 strikes, and then it was a while before I got my 3rd, so I didn't get banned. But YouTube, dude, I mean, the last time they gave me a strike, it was for a video that was months and months old. It's just weird. The people at YouTube, what I've realized about YouTube is that if you have a certain level, subscribers and influence, as long as you don't cross a certain line, as long as you don't get into certain domains, they're not going to ban
do whatever
you.
the
And
fuck
if someone
you
makes
want.
a mistake, if one of these content moderators flips the wrong button, you have the ability to get in contact with someone at YouTube or at Google directly to try and fix it. But me and a lot of people I know, they'll just give you a strike. There's nothing you can do. I hit, how you can hit appeal? It doesn't do anything. They never accept it.
Doesn't do
So it's
anything.
almost useless.
Yeah, well, the state capitalist apparatus has to protect their bottom line, because if they let people say whatever they wanted, then they would have no problems, getting some traction for some fairly subversive ideas that might damage the status quo in their paychecks. So they've got to maintain their profit and their power somehow, and they've got to silence people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I don't like is that people say they're like, oh, they just go after conservatives. I'm like, look, listen.
I know
Jimmy
so
Dore.
many leftists they've
Yeah, they
banned.
go after Jimmy. Jimmy Dore is the
That's
one
true.
guy I do like. I like some of what I like a lot of what he has.
Well, then you should check out Cody Johnson on Some More News. You should check out Peter Coffin, T1J. You should check out Abby Martin. There's so many good leftists. Andy Speaks.
There are good leftists. Actually, Lizard. Jesus, who do you think are some good YouTubers that talk about some of the ideas you like that we can take a look at, or that you might recommend, some content creators that might be on the right path?
Well, yeah, I would recommend Larkin Rose for sure.
I love Larkin Rose.
Man, I haven't really been asked this.
Sorry, I know it's a tough question.
It's okay. 1 second, let me take a look at my phone.
Oh, and hey, Lizard Jesus, if you want more hard leaning left sorts of things, all of those people would be good people to follow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Peter Coffin's one of those people who've actually retweeted my tweets supporting him. So, being willing to be associated at all with me is a challenging thing that most people aren't willing to do.
Yeah, I struggle with it.
Yeah, definitely.
But we respect the great nation of Somalia post 1991 for their efforts and their success in creating the best decentralized society ever.
I would not say that, but I don't know about that. I think that's a bit of you're bit over the top.
It is over the top. I just argue a Jeffersonian democracy has to have smaller consensus, where if you use customary law, it has a wider scope. That doesn't necessarily mean the development indicators are going to get better in Somalia than America, because they don't have that capacity to do so.
The closest thing to a government I would support is the Kingdom of Acorn.
The closest thing to a government I would support is Chiron.
Well, the Kingdom of Acorn operated a lot like Chiron, so you might read the Sonnet comics and find out more.
So what's going on in Chiron? I heard some news, maybe this was a couple months ago, that there was, violence in the streets or something like that. Is that one of those things where the media is just sort of hyping it up to make the country look very inhumane and destabilized? What's going on with that? Because I'm not too informed on that particular.
I know so many anarchists in that region, and they would have told me if shit was sideways. It's not fucking sideways. I don't know where you heard that, but they're menstruating on their face. They're like Tub Girl menstruating. They got this big old fountain. Oh no, my precious state capitalism is being challenged by these people who kicked out the politicians and cops. Let me write a fucking menstrual piece about it.
That sounds about right. That's what I figured, but I wasn't sure.
Other than that,
we need to move on quickly.
Move on. No, here's the thing. Other than that, here's what I would say. A lot of people are going to demonize Chiron because it's actually an experiment in decentralization that's working. Mm-hmm. And what I notice is any experiment that works good in decentralization, the media will ignore. The
Philadelphia move.
Yeah, the media will only pick stuff that helps with the state narrative because they're part of it. They're basically the mouthpiece for the state, as far as I'm concerned. Like the
Because they're funded by them and they support their funding source.
Yeah. So
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah, exactly. These corporate logos are a mirage to say, hey, bash this corporate logo, but it's not us. It's not the feds. It's these corporate logos. The corporate logos to me are just arms of the state. They're going to bash Iran. They're going to bash Somalia. They're going to bash any society. And I'm not even going to say those are perfect anarchies. They're not.
Iran's a lot closer than Somalia was.
Fair enough. And I wouldn't argue that. But I will argue that any experiment in decentralization that works, they will find something wrong. I don't care.
Philadelphia move.
Yeah.
They just called out of space in Philly and people bitched about it until they bombed it and blew up a bunch of kids.
Yep. So yeah, they're gonna find anything.
Were you gonna say, Lizard?
I think that my roommate brought up a really good point that anarchy kind of takes some sort of intent. And it kind of seems like Somalia kind of was ridden with a bunch of roving warlords that dominated everything. So it wasn't necessarily anarchy in the way that people think.
It wasn't anarchy at all.
Think of anarchy, you know. Yeah.
Well, okay.
I would say that a better example would be Nestor Makhno's Free Territory before it fucking collapsed due to the Soviet takeover.
Or the initial, like, sort of Celtic, sort of Irish pagan societies.
That's a good example. Or medieval Iceland.
Yeah.
Thing. It can be debated depending on how you drop where you drop the scope of anarchy. Yes, the warlords did expropriate, but as Leeson would say, they did it like a mugger, and I wouldn't necessarily call a mugger a state. So it depends where you want.
They're states. They're exerting their authority.
They're micro states. It's fun. It's minarchy. If we want to say Somalia is minarchy, I can live with that.
A mugger is total control over that person in the moment. The difference between minarchy and maxarchy is like semantic and momental.
An earth nerd anarchist, little preach. So, with that being said, did you have any content creators you found, Lizard, that you liked?
No, honestly.
Well, they don't have to be on YouTube either.
Content creators kind of still
know. Okay. Yeah, I was telling people about
Bastion
as well, so
I don't really have anything.
Oh, sorry.
I was just saying I don't really have anything. Sorry.
No, that was my fault. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and definitely wrap it up. Lizard, I really want to thank you for taking the time. Daniel, Jeremy, everybody.
Yeah, of course.
I think if we keep pushing forward, that we're going to find that a lot of anarchist groups and a lot of synergy organizations will work a lot better. And what's exciting to me about that is we're really actually creating, as Jeremy would call it, the parallel economy. I might call it, solving the HCQ, the hardest case question. We're creating a system that can create enough wealth or a better living for people without the confines and violence of the state. And if we can keep working towards that, even though we might have different economic ideas and ways of doing so, I think that's going to be very, very effective. And in turn, we're also learning more and growing more just by learning about like different ideas. Like I know some people just get put off when you use a term, like you're saying, like, oh, Ancap or Ancom or this or free market anarchist, which we can change the language. But I think, and definitely I will try free market anarchist or decentralized communities. But I think
could just say anarchist.
Yeah, I could just say anarchist too. There's different ideas behind that, like Rothbard, Konkin. So I think it's important to explore those ideas. I think, like,
imagine this channel, instead of this yellow and black flag in the upper right-hand corner, there's just an anarchist A. Wouldn't that be better?
I might do that. I might do that. I'm going to end this by showing a video that got me inspired to do this. Jeremy did help a lot. And actually, when Jeremy says I'm the bottom strip, I am too, actually, now. I am definitely the bottom strip. I'm not just like a random Ancap man in Ancap.
Showing up on the first page of Google? not be the best for everyone.
Can you guys hear
With
this?
respect to the question
Yeah.
of socialism, how, I think if I understood the question correctly, how could we effectively make a socialist program viable, which is a greater obstacle to it, white supremacy or the Democratic Party? I thought that was kind of a cool way of putting it. But I want to level a challenge back, a thought experiment. For all those who have some sort of sympathy with the ideals expressed by socialists, I want you to think for a moment, what would happen if they simply faced no opposition of any kind and were capable of instituting the policies that they favor? Do you think it would work? Now, of course it would work. Well, I have to say I'm ever less convinced that it would. Now, I also think that if we did the experiment on the other side of the spectrum, if we handed power over to economic libertarians and we allowed them to deregulate anything, do you think it would work? Absolutely not. So my point is actually this one. If you're familiar, I want to be cautious about the political compass test itself. This is an online test that allows you to diagnose yourself in a 4-quadrant model. I don't know how good the questions are at actually placing people on it, but I do think that the diagram that has 2 axes, a left-right axis on the X and authoritarian versus libertarian on the Y-axis, is actually a very useful way of looking at things. And my point would be that the 2 libertarian quadrants, libertarian left, where I am, libertarian right, where the economic libertarians are, those 2 quadrants, once they recognize that nobody in those quadrants actually knows the description of the system that we should be building, have tremendous reason to unite, because actually we are agreed about values. We are agreed about the fundamental importance of liberty. And now what we need to do is have a discussion about how practical interventions might be and what those interventions we might propose would be in light of what we now know that those who architected the ideas behind socialism didn't know. So I would say, not to make it too black and white, but the enemy of those who hold liberty as a great value are the authoritarians. And the 2 authoritarian quadrants are actually not united. They don't like each other, and for good reason. So there is great advantage in putting our differences aside in those 2 libertarian quadrants and recognizing that the differences we have are about policy and that none of us have the right answers on that front.
Thank you, Brett. And before we
All right. That's really the video. I started watching that while I was working. I'm like, I'm really inspired by this. Really inspired by this to change direction, not just to say, hey, and maybe I'll even change the icon eventually as well, instead of just saying an Ancap flag, to say, hey, let's build coalitions. That's really what I'm after. That doesn't mean I'm saying like, oh, I'm done with LPMC or anything like that. I still believe in building up the Libertarian Party in that sense to work with local elections, because for me it's easier to stop the feds at a local level than go to feds and stop them there, as they would say in the LPMC. But
You don't need to go to the feds. If you have enough liberty, they'll come to you.
yeah, and we'll nullify them at the local level. So with that being said, though, that's why I'm super passionate about coalitioning, and I hope people who watch this, if you got through an hour and 30 minutes,
hey, it's an hour and 38.
Hour and 38, fine. If you get through an hour and 38 minutes, Jeremy's going to give me a hard time when it goes to 39. But if you can do that, I think you'll find great advantage of working together, different schools of anarchy.
And I'm certainly willing to do that, by the way. If you've got a group or a thing you want me involved in and you're willing to be accountable and ideologically consistent, feel free to hit me up.
Yeah. And where can we find you guys? Yeah. And I'm funny enough, I'm part of a lot of different groups now. I do support the Agris Nexus, Mad Liberty, and the Mises Caucus, and actually even other stuff in that domain I'm looking at. Where can we find you guys? You can start with whoever.
So you can find me on YouTube at Conquering the Divide, Facebook, The Quantum Effect Show, Danny Vitro on Facebook, and then have a new channel which I didn't realize I wasn't approved for streaming, but now that I am, It's my Dan's Health and Fitness channel. I'm going to be re-uploading a video I did with a teacher who is very well versed in nutrition, and we talk about seed oils, we talk about carbohydrates, we talk about cholesterol, we talk about BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We talk about all those sort of health and physiological. Yep, right there. There's the video.
That was excellent. Yeah, and I watched that.
His Twitter handle, by the way, go check him out. His Twitter handle is seed oils, oxalates, and something else. You'll find it as soon as you look that up on Twitter. He's great. Him and Paul Saladino have a dialogue, so a lot of the same information. He's less dogmatic as Paul Saladino and some other more carnivore people are. But I really suggest, if you want to learn about seed oils and learn about it in a nuanced way and learn about other things related to seed oils, this guy, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and definitely I do think whether you're vegan, carnivore, carnivore, paleo, anything, seed oils, I can say down the line, processed foods, I don't think are good at all. I'm very confident to say that. Now, people have different preferences in eating, and that's fine. Lizard, where can we find your information? I know Facebook and Liberty.
Yeah, you can find us, the Mad Liberty, on Facebook. You can also find us at our Twitter handle, Redacted Hatters. And we also have a Discord called the Mad Liberty Project.
Yeah,
So
let me go ahead and
we basically just focus on anarcho unity and trying to spread that message and denying the mainstream narrative.
Yeah. So we're basically free folk, as we say it. I 100% agree with that. Definitely go ahead, smash the like button there. Join up with the Discord. You do have to go through the application process, but it's really a lot of fun. And one thing I really love about all of this stuff right here is that you can actually learn about different schools of anarchy. So if you have a question, they're more than willing to answer it and to help you out, as opposed to just saying, oh, you said this or you said that, or, you know, I've probably said things that are ridiculous and goofy, but instead of just saying, oh, you're wrong, you're stupid, you're bad, or this, or don't call yourself that, or, you know, you're this or that. There's no name calling, and I do appreciate that.
It would be great if that were true.
It is true. All right, Jeremy, definitely Agorist Nexus, correct?
Yeah, agoristnexus.com. You can find me at Insanity is Free, other places. Also, Jeremiah Talks on YouTube, and Jeremiah EXE for like alternate tweets. And also, if you want some, a trip down insanity with the worst account on Twitter, you can go Jeremiah Zip. There's like lots of options if you want to find your home among my mental illness. There's plenty of places.
Yeah,
and I'm all about coalitions. So if you've got a project, feel free to hit me up. If you've got a server, feel free to hit me up. And as long as you're civil with me, I'll be civil with you. So
yeah, that sounds good to me. And you can also follow.
There is one last thing I'd like to say. Are you done, Jeremy, or you still got something to add?
Go for it.
Okay, so I finally had, after literally years, got the new studio. Multiple rooms. It's nice. I got a setup going. So I wanted to ask Kareem and Jeremy, where do you live at?
Spokane.
Okay.
Washington.
So that's kind of far. Go ahead, Kareem.
I'll be down for the anti-war protest in DC with the Mises Caucus. In February.
When is that going on?
That is February 19th. I'm going to be at Rage Against the War Machine. And I will bring a crass sign. The nature of your oppression is the aesthetic of our anger.
I might see if I can check that out, but I'm definitely gonna for sure invite you, Kareem, and I'd like to invite Jeremy as well. Maybe all three of us together. I'd be willing to, help pay for the flight. It's not that far from. I mean, you live in Pennsylvania, so I mean, it's not even that long of a drive. But get you guys down here in person and do an in-person podcast and talk and have a discussion. I really want to do that. I think there could be great benefit to that.
Potentially. I would definitely be down to do something like that when my sort of economic situation improves. Right now I need 850 within the week, so we'll see if that can figure out. But basically, yeah, I'm willing to do things like that. I want to make it interesting, and I'm shortly moving into a house that will be more conducive to content creation, because this one fucking ain't.
That's good. Yeah, me too. Exactly. Yeah, it makes a difference. You know, the more space you have.
Yeah, and we'll be I'll be with like anarchists instead of all these people who basically don't respect what I do. So longtime friends are moving up to Spokane, and we're gonna do our own little anarcho village kind of project, like Konkin style.
That's good. That's really good.
Nice.
So, but that's long in the future. I got to get myself economically established. So, any of you who want to support what I do, I need $8.50 by the end of the week to get some of it started. So, that's what I need.
Definitely, if you can, help Jeremy out. I know he put the PayPal link also in here, and support him on Patreon. All right, guys, is there anything else you want to close with?
Read the Sonic comics.
Read.
I'm trying to think.
Read Peter T. Leeson.
What about you, Lizard?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you.
Yeah, it was great
Nice
meeting you
talking
too,
to you.
man.
All right.
That's it.
If that is it, guys, this is Kareem with the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. We had an amazing Unity talk, probably the best one we've had. Guys, if you actually open yourself to different schools of anarchy, you'll widen your horizons and broaden your thoughts. So I especially want to thank Lizard Jesus for taking the time to do this. I want to thank my amazing co-host Daniel Petro once again. And I want to thank Jeremiah. Insanity is free from Agorist Nexus. Read the Sonic comics, because Jeremiah's enemies hate Sonic. So I guess Dr. Robotnik's a statist. With all that being said,
well, Robotnik's a technocratic fascist. He's everything I hate.
Fair enough. With that being said, let's end this, and I'll catch you in the next one.